If you were one of the last human beings on Earth, what would you do? Your world has been overtaken by strange monsters who are hell-bent on turning you into one of them. Now you have to engage in unending battles with your friends, and the only way to win is if your friend can successfully create an antivirus to turn every monster back into a human. Today I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the army of monsters in Gibiate. This young lady is going to be forced to face certain death many times in the next few days. Kathleen here is your average female anime protagonist. She doesn't have any special abilities, but somehow all the studs are drawn to her. She starts a documentary just to let whoever finds it know that she existed, because from what she can see, her world is ending. And it's not her fault, or at least that's what we think. And it all started 2 years ago with the arrival of strange creatures called Gibiates. As they arrived, they started infecting humans, and this made human beings turn into weird, creepy monsters. Kathleen decides that she's going to make an antivirus to turn all the affected humans back to normal. So she wishes for God's help, but she doesn't realize that her wish is about to cost her dearly. Meanwhile, all the way back in 1600 AD, these two skilled fighters are about to receive the shock of their lives. Kenroku and Sensui have been exiled by their masters, but as their boatmen rows them away from their city, strange blue light flashes and the waters get rowdy, and when they open their eyes, they're no longer in 1600 AD. They have now teleported into the year 2030, and their lives are about to get much worse. They decide to look around while talking, and they run into this dead-looking dude. But as soon as they get closer to him, he starts shaking violently and turns into a monster. Sensui quickly grabs a metal stick and gets ready to fight off the monster. The samurai in him is already roaring for battle, but he soon realizes his mistake, because when he hits it with his weapon, the weapon breaks into two. Kenroku tries to support him by using a fire extinguisher like a stone. Can't really blame him, because he's from a primitive era, but he has no luck too. Luckily, his primitive fighting skills make him a lot faster than the creature, and so he moves out of harm's way before the creature can attack him. Anyway, the creature looks at him and gets ready for its second attack, and without a weapon, Sensui can tell that it might not be a really long fight. Oh, well, this is great. We just mysteriously transported into a weird area, and now we have to die at the hands of a monster we've never seen before. But things could have gone way differently if our boys had done something differently. And my answer is rooted deep in human psychology. When every human being is faced with a terrifying situation, they have a physiological reaction known as acute stress response that occurs naturally. Stress hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine make us either fight the situation or run away by taking flight. But that's where the problem is, because our guys over here have been in so many life or death situations. Their fight or flight response systems have been skewed towards fighting all the time, which we may think is a good thing because it shows how much of a stud they are, but in reality, it's a very dangerous programming that leads to a dulling of their danger, a sense that is responsible for our survival. If I were in their shoes, when I run into a human being that suddenly morphs into a monster before my very eyes, given my training, I would take stock of my options. We have no weapons that we trained with and can trust to defend us. We're in an area that we don't know, and we're facing a monster whose potentials, abilities, and strengths are all unknowns. I would take the more logical option by running away. Kenroku already shows this. When the monster comes to attack him, he notices that it is much slower than he is. And the same can be said for Sensui, because he blocked the monster's first attack without even knowing it was going to attack in the first place. So with our combined speed, we would signal ourselves to run in opposite directions and agree to meet up where the teleportation device dumped us. This would confuse the monster, and the delayed response from deciding which of us to chase would give us more time to escape, and both of us would end up outrunning the monster, and therefore escape with our lives intact. Luckily for our boys, Kathleen shows up just as they're about to get beaten, and she uses her taser gun to shock the living daylights out of the creature. With the limited time she's bought, she asks them to join her in her car with this old man, but then she uses this strange device to extract some of the creature's blood, and Kathleen explains that they're still in Japan, but in the future, and it's a little weird because they take it a little too calmly and in stride, but hey, no judgment here. She gives them the short story of the Gibiates and humanity's new fight for survival. When the driver named Maeda realizes that Sensui is a samurai without a sword, he decides to risk it all by heading to his house alone to fetch his old family sword for Sensui, and he has no idea that he's about to walk into a trap. Kathleen takes them to the camp where they meet this marine named Brian, and although the other members of the camp don't seem to like them, our boys don't care. They run into Kathleen's mom, but she doesn't show any different reaction to their arrival, and Kathleen says it's because she's been broken by the Gibiate, and now she can't tell them apart from human beings. She introduces them to the camp doctor and the lead researcher, as well as this very run-down marine named Adam. The doctor is named Yoshinaga, and he tells them all about his research, and he warns them that those who get stung by the Gibiate would hear the sound of running water until they eventually morph into monsters. As they walk, all the lights in the camp turn off, because apparently the Gibiate are sensitive to light. What they don't know is that their camp is about to get attacked. Kathleen takes them to her dojo to confirm if they would be useful to the campus security, but when she asks Sensui to spar with her, disarms her so quickly quickly in only 3 steps no less, despite her being a black belt fighter. Yeah, she figures out he's the real deal. After changing into modern clothes, they all go to Kathleen's mom for treatment. Sensui asks her about the history of his era because she loves the Edo period, and that's when he learns that his master was beheaded for corruption. Maeda successfully gets his sword and returns back to camp, but when some monsters try to stop him at the gate, the Marines use their floodlights to push him back because the creatures are sensitive to light. Maeda heads down to where Sensui and the rest are, but just as he's about to hand over the sword, the electricity trips off, and immediately the place descends into chaos. And the Gibiate start their night attack. One swoops down and grabs Maeda and the sword before flying away. Sensui rushes after and jumps so high you'd think he's flying, and he grabs Maeda's leg, but instead, Maeda slips the sword into his hand. As soon as it enters, our boy goes into beast mode, and in a split second, he makes mincemeat out of the flying creature with Maeda and lands like a hero with Maeda in his hands and the sword in his mouth. But it's too late. Maeda has been infected by the Gibiate's poison, and Sensui promises to come back with help. He then charges into the army of monsters like a mad dog on a mission and starts slashing. Meanwhile, Kenroku and Yoshinaga help all the people in the camp to escape through a safe tunnel, away from where all the fighting is going down. When Kenroku asks if Yoshinaga can't get the lights up and running again, Yoshinaga says they have to prepare for a larger Gibiate attack that is coming. He suggests they secure some light by burning some of the camp tents, and asks Kenroku to join him. But as they head out, the monsters attack and start turning the people in the camp into Gibiates. And just when one enters Kathleen's mom's room, and Kathleen shows up with her stun gun, she stuns the creature and grabs her mom and runs away. Kenroku and Yoshinaga don't have much luck with the lights, because the creatures just keep on attacking. Well, that is until Kenroku sees that these slip lines that remind him of some of his ninja tools. He uses them creatively to hang some Gibiate and rip their heads off with insane strength. Sensui goes back to Adam and Brian and sends them to look after Kathleen instead. Adam finds Kathleen, but when they get back, Sensui is having a hard time with this creature. Kenroku backs him up with some bombs, but Sensui and Kenroku are so much stronger together that even Yoshinaga is impressed. Everything's looking good as the sun finally begins to rise, but when they head back to where Maeda was, they meet a sad sight. His eyes have changed and his breathing is already ragged. Before long, Maeda would turn into a Gibiate, and instead he chooses the honorable end and asks Sensui to do him in. Sensui honors his request and slashes his head into 2. But as the group prepares to head out, 2 men watch them from the shadows, and none of the group knows that they are about to leave the safest place on Earth. That makes me sad. Maeda-san was already turning into one of my favorite characters, but he didn't have to die. If I were in his shoes, here's how I would have kept me alive. There are 2 main reasons why Maeda-san died, and both have to do really with poor planning, both on his part and the part of the camp administrators. The first mistake they made was allowing Maeda to go and fetch a sword for Sensui all by himself. I mean, sure, he's impulsive and excited, but Kathleen should have known better, especially since she was really close to him. Think about it, if Kenroku, Sensui, and Kathleen had gone with him. 2 things would have changed. First, they wouldn't have spent as much time as he took to get back to the camp. They had a car while he was running on foot, while carrying a heavy sword from only heaven knows where. If they'd all gone together, they would have picked up the sword and gone back to the camp with daylight, meaning he would have been safe by the time the Gibiates came to attack, and Sensui would have already been with the sword. And secondly, it would have been less of a risk if Sensui and Kenroku went with him, because he would have had 2 bodyguards and 1 girl that's really good with a stun gun. So just by changing the nifty little detail just a little bit, we could have kept our precious Maeda-san alive. It's safe to say that the reason for the camp was not attacked all this while was because of the light around the camp at night, and sunshine during the daytime. But if that was the case, then the military guys in the camp suffered from a lack of big foresight. Kathleen pointed out that there were little over 100 people in the camp. Certainly someone in the mix had to be an electrical engineer or at least a handyman enough to know how to jerry-rig some things. I would divide the responsibility from protecting the camp between the Marines and the repairmen. The repairmen would run shifts around our lead equipment to make sure they're all functioning optimally at all times. That way we are certain that the maintenance of the lights is covered. And with the lights consistently on, the Marines' job of keeping the place safe becomes a lot easier because the number of Gibiates that would be able to attack would reduce drastically. By morning, their camp had been destroyed because of the fire they had used as light, and before they decide to travel to the only other place nearby that has a research facility, Niigata. But first, Dr. Sun asks Sensui to help him gather more research sample blood by killing lots of Gibiates, and that's not all. Before they can leave, the doctor has to get all his research work from the lab, but as they enter the hall, he warns everyone that there's going to be a lot of Gibiates waiting for them. They all head out and agree to meet on the roof after grabbing all the relevant stuff like food and doctor's research, and after they move in, Sensui does his bodyguard duties and slashes a bunch of monsters. But when they climb up to the roof, they find this strange-looking dude lying on the floor. Sensui decides to help him because the human population is already so scarce, and as you can expect, this decision's gonna cost them. The doctor drives the helicopter towards the position of the man, but as they get closer, this strange-looking Gibiate shows up and pulls out a Catwoman signature move on our boys. The sound almost ruptures their eardrums, and they realize they can't endure much more of this sound. And the doctor sees the monster, and it looks like he knows it. A Gibiate monster that can withstand the sun, giving me some Alucard vibes. Immediately, Dr. Yoshinaga decides that it's too risky to try and save the guy, but when they try to fly away, the monster uses its web-like hair to grab their helicopter. Kenroku springs into action immediately with his thread wire thingies and a bomb, but it doesn't do much damage to the creature's hair. Sensui attacks the creature, but its skin is so hard that his sword bounces off, so Kenroku does the next best thing. He recruits the help of the strange man they were trying to save in the first place. And this giant dude looks like a monk, and as you'd expect, he's crazy strong too. He channels his inner Captain America and he uses the wire line to do a tug of war with the freaking monster, and this gives the crew enough time to jump out of the copter. But Brian gets injured by the creature on his way down, and the monk introduces himself as Yukinojo, and that's when Kathleen notices something else. Kenroku is still in the helicopter. Kenroku chooses the ninja way and charges the helicopter into the giant Gibiate monster, forcing it down the building. The helicopter explodes in the air and everyone takes a minute to mourn Kenroku. I'm kidding. The shinobi in him won't go down that easily. Zoroboy just mysteriously shows up hanging by a thread, and they all settle back into the building, and it turns out both Kenroku and Sensui know Yukinojo, because he's from their era as well. What a quinky dink! But then what the frick is actually going on here? But before I can answer that, Kenroku asks more pressing questions. What was the monster they just fought against? And Dr. Yoshinaga proves why he's the nerd of the group. He tells them it's a creature called Meteora. It's more deadly than the average Gibiate, but even after hearing this, Kenroku and the new giant close their eyes and go to sleep. Dr. Yoshinaga takes Brian for treatment while the rest of the folks go grab some more supplies. But as soon as Dr. Yoshinaga injects Brian with a painkiller, he goes into full GBA mode. Brian's GBA attacks Dr. Yoshinaga, but luckily Adam was close by and he shoots the living daylights out of Brian before realizing it is his superior he was shooting at. Dr. Yoshinaga explains that Brian was infected by Meteora before she stabbed him, but the truth is even more shocking. Meanwhile, Kathleen's mom wanders off on her own and finds a samurai exhibition. How convenient. And she finds there's something super mind-blowing and super helpful to them. Sensui heads into the museum exhibition and finds himself face to face with the original weapons he used back in 1600 AD. And not just for him. Kenroku and even Yukinojo find the original weapons all stacked up side by side in the museum. Too convenient, wouldn't you agree? As if to test out their new weapons, some monsters show up. Gosh, they even get a practice run with their old weapons. This is so slated in their favor. Yukinojo, Kenroku, and Sensui don't waste any time in slicing the monsters apart. And when they get outside, they realize that rain is falling. And because of the rain, the entire area has gone dark enough for the monsters to show their ugly heads. And luckily, Dr. Yoshinaga and Adam arrive with the bus. Sensui goes berserk and kills off a lot of monsters before they head into the bus. But when they get in, Sensui has to rest and get bandaged up because he overworked himself. Unfortunately, while they move, Dr. Yoshinaga runs into a sharp stone that punctures their tire. And all that noise brings the Gibiates right to them. They charge Adam with their numbers, and for the first time since arriving in this world, Kenroku considers that this rain-filled road might be his own Waterloo. Kenroku and Yukinojo start the battle against the monsters, but they can tell it's a losing battle already. However, Adam comes out and decides to even the odds. He runs in the direction of the monsters coming from behind the vehicle, and as soon as Kenroku sees him running, he realizes what's happening. Adam's time is up. Turns out Adam got poisoned during their last tussle to escape the former facility where Sensui fought like a madman. But as a soldier, Adam promised to make his death worthwhile for his friends, so he strapped himself up with dynamite and lit them after getting close enough to the monsters. He blows himself to bits and destroys the bridge with him, forcing the monsters into the river, and this gives the rest of the team the chance to repair their tire and hit the road again. But Kathleen's heart is sad. Why? Because 3 of her friends are dead. The next question on her mind now is, who's gonna be next? Sensui wakes up to the news of Adam's death. Kathleen's mom helps Yukinojo repair his cloth, and somewhere in the mix, Yukinojo realizes that he may be falling for Kathleen's mom. What? Oh, brother. Because he's a monk. He's never known the love of a woman. But his master once told him that having a love life would give him more power because he would have something to fight and live for. But Yukinojo didn't agree with his master because to him, loving someone meant being able to die for them. Wow, what a stud. They head to a more sane-looking city, but our stalkers from before are back. And this time, they've come hunting. This ninja-like looking dude uses a fishnet to trap Kathleen Chuan, and they introduce themselves as escaped convicts. And even in this apocalyptic world, they try to rob Sensui. This is wild how depraved humans can be. But seriously, they're actually going to try to take the sword from him? Wow, they're dumb. Anyway, they tell Sensui's group to leave their food behind because nobody's going to get hurt. As expected, Sensui refuses and gets ready to charge at the Yakuza boss. And the Yakuza boss draws his sword and challenges Sensui to a one-on-one duel. And it went exactly as we would think because Sensui, who spent his lifetime with the sword, quickly beats up the Yakuza in basically one move. Really, just one move. It was beautiful. And since Sensui won, the Yakuza group take their boss and run away in their bus. After getting what they need, need to continue their journey, and that's when they arrive at this tunnel. Dr. Yoshinaga puts on his nerd cap and points out that because the tunnel is so dark, he would not be surprised to find Gibiates inside. Sensui tells the doctor to keep driving because he's ready to cut down any monster that stands in their way. And as soon as they enter, they find monsters waiting for them like hungry, hangry men at a buffet. Sensui and Kenroku and Yokinojo head out, but Sensui goes after all the strong enemies all by himself. And inside, Dr. Yoshinaga gets some bombs ready so they can clear the path they would take out. And Kathleen decides to go do the bomb throwing. The only problem is, Kathleen is a klutz. She manages to clear the path with the bomb, but while running back to the bus, she trips and falls right in front of a Gibiate. Yep, goodbye Kathleen, nice knowing ya. Kenroku sees her in danger and rushes to assist her, but the Gibiates have another thing planned. They block his path with more numbers, and for the first time, their attack actually looks pretty coordinated. Sensui and Yukinojo don't have any better luck getting to her because more monsters keep showing up, and Kathleen says her prayers, closes her eyes, and says goodbye to this world. But when she opens up, the strange-looking woman has slashed all the monsters close to her, and she remembers the word of her late father that disasters always come to an end. She thanks the lady who introduces herself as Ayame. Luckily for Kathleen, Ayame is a former cop. Together with Ayame, Sensui and his group round up the battle against the Gibiates. Sensui, Kenroku, and Yokinojo fight with so much coordination it's hard to believe they weren't original teammates, but it actually makes sense because they're all freaking professionals from a different era. Anyways, even Dr. Yoshinaga is impressed. After slashing, tying, cutting, and slamming, they finally kill all the nearby Gibiates. Well, that turned out well, but in reality that was way too close for comfort. Especially with Kathleen's life on the line like that. Things would have gone differently if our crew had remembered one simple trick. Remember how we said these guys have a problem with planning? Well, it's even more plain in this fight. What would have happened if Ayame Chuan didn't show up like she did? Kathleen is everyone's pet, except well maybe Dr. Yoshinaga, which is suspicious if you ask me. Yet they left her entirely undefended and at the mercy of the Gibiates. Sure, they were fighting them off and Yokinojo asked her to stay in the car and protect her mother, but that's not enough. They would have gone through the tunnel without even needing to get down and fight. Everyone already knows that the Gibiates can attack when there is a lot of light, and that's why they don't come out during the day. But what if we're able to recreate daytime and night, or at least mimic its brightness? And to do this, you only need one tool that's been saving performers on stage since the 21st century. Floodlights, baby. Yes, that's right. This great invention had the greatest of scientists of the 20th century shaking in their boots, and these will be our greatest ally in the fight against Gibiates. And we know that Sensui and the rest of the warriors from the 1600s love to show off their battle prowess, but sometimes they do a bit too much. There would be no need to fight if they just picked up a couple of floodlights. I mean, think about it, they stop at a different shop to grab supplies, but because they're only thinking small, all they've been picking up is food. If I were in their shoes, I would locate the nearest floodlight shop. I mean, come on, it's a modern day and age. I'm sure they could find the right shop that would have these things, and it would most likely be empty because the shop owner is dead. That way, wherever we go, whether by night or day, we will be able to turn these things on and hold them out of our windows and making our bus a giant moving sun. And the creatures are afraid of light and none of them would be able to come near us. And with this, Kathleen would never get in danger, and if she had the stun gun, she would have been able to stun the monster and use the opportunity to run back into the car, or at least delay its response until help came. Kathleen introduces Ayame to the rest of the crew because she's human and they invite her to travel with them. But our Yakuza stalkers are back again. These pieces of crab watch them fight without giving any assistance. Sounds very pro helping your fellow man type of thing to me. That was sarcasm. Anyway, the crew heads to a hot spring because they've seen enough stress for one day, and Ayame tells Kathleen about her childhood and about how her father was a dangerous man, but she has no idea that fate has a very twisted set of plans in store for her. Meanwhile, in the men's bath, they notice that Sensui has fresh scars on his back, but he downplays them as old wounds, and that makes me wonder, if he's been cut by the Gibiate, why isn't he turning into one? After bathing, they get into the bus and get ready to move again, and that's when Dr. Yoshinaga notices they're being followed by a small car. The car pulls up close to them and Ayame receives the shock of her life. It's her dad, the Yakuza boss. Ooh, this is gonna get juicy. Turns out Ayame became a cop because of her deadbeat Yakuza dad, but never got the chance because the Gibiates showed up before she could. When the Yakuza boss realized that his little group had run out of food, he decided it was time to try fighting with Sensui's group again. For Yakuza, they proved to be pretty smart because he figured out the road where Sensui's bus would be and just ordered his guys to keep driving until they saw them. Pretty smart, right? Meanwhile, Sensui gets intrigued by the Google map Dr. Yoshinaga is using to drive, but what he doesn't know is that he's gonna need that very soon. The Yakuza catch up with them, and just when they try to ram them off the road, Meteora shows up, and she looks pretty small, but then she gets really big. She charges at the Yakuza car and sends them spinning. But just when she's about to end their Yakuza lineage, Sensui shows up, and as the honorable samurai that he is, stops her from clashing with him. Together with Kenroku, he mounts a counterattack, while Yukinojo rescues the Yakuza. Sensui and Kenroku keep the beast occupied with attack after attack. Inside the bus, Kathleen and her mother convince Ayame-san to make peace with her dad because they've lost their own dad, and it's all very sad and at the same time encouraging. Boo-hoo, I don't care. Ayame remembers killing her mother just before she turned into a Gibiate, so she decides to have a talk talk with her father. After rescuing the guys from the car, Yukinojo joins the battle against the modified Meteora. And even with how big he is, she's still too much to handle. And that's when Meteora does something really weird, because everyone realizes it's trying to talk. Ame leaves the car because she's sure she has cooked up a way to take down the monster and save everyone for good. Thank you, someone's using their brain for once. She looks around and finds an abandoned car, and somehow that's all that she needs. And just when the monster charges towards Sensui, Ame turns up with her car and rams the monster off the railing and into the sea. She manages to jump out and do that really cool ninja spin before the car follows the monster into the sea. And now with everyone safe, she pulls the full counter on her father, and instead of getting scolded by him, she gives him the scolding of his gray butt life, filled with a very touching speech of how he could have been better and been there when her mother died, and she has no idea that her speech will cause some very drastic changes in her father. But her moment is cut short because now that the monster is gone, Sensui can stop acting tough, and he falls to the ground and passes out. And turns out our stud of a samurai is badly injured, once again making me wonder, why is he not turning into a Gibiate? Anyway, Ame leads them down to a food storehouse where they give Sensui the chance he needs to get some rest. But none of them know that this rest will lead to a life-threatening circumstance for everyone. And that's not even all, because when they arrive at the storehouse, Ame heads out and slashes all the available monsters, but she doesn't know that she missed one. As soon as Kathleen's mom shows up, this little slimy piece of crap shows up and stabs her. Great, another potential death on her hands, but would this be the last? Kenroku quickly kills the creature, but the damage has already been done. How sad. Now everyone has to wait and see if Kathleen's mom would be able to survive, but Dr. Yoshinaga tries to give them hope, but no one's really buying it. Meanwhile, Ayame can't stop blaming herself because she thinks it's all her fault for not seeing the monster when she killed the others. They take Kathleen's mom inside, but while they get some rest, they notice that Kathleen's mom has disappeared. Kathleen finds a message from mommy, and her mom has said what every true mother would do. I love you so much and I'm gonna go because basically I don't want to put you in harm, blah blah blah. That's the gist. So she runs away. Yukinojo tries to encourage her and talks to her about how his newfound love for curry, and he asks her to make some for him if the chance arises. To keep her promise, she gives him a precious charm from her mom and even goes on to sew it into his shirt just to keep him safe because she doesn't want to lose another person. Kathleen consoles herself and goes to look after Sensui in his very bad fever, and for someone who has fought the most Gibiates, he seems to be doing pretty well if you ask me, especially given his injuries. Outside, Kenroku tries to encourage Ame and tells her not to blame herself, and they go on to search for supplies, but what they don't know is that the car they pass has Kathleen's mom inside, and she's already turning into a Gibiate. When they arrive at the storehouse, it's crawling with Gibiate. They spend most of their time killing monsters and finally grab some very much needed supplies. Once they gather enough, they decide to split up, but as soon as Kenroku leaves her, Ame gets attacked by a Gibiate, but because she feels responsible for the death of Kathleen's mom, she decides to not really attack it, and of course it almost kills her, but luckily Kenroku was just watching secretly and he jumps in the nick of time and saves her and scolds her to get her head back in the game. They head back with the loot, but before they arrive, a lot of monsters show up where Kathleen and Yukinojo are. They run for a bit and Kathleen braces herself to protect Sensui for the first time, but when they arrive at the first place of battle, Yukinojo locks her in a room like a stud and pulls out his mace. And he's ready to fight like Captain America versus all the armies of Thanos all by himself. The only question he leaves us asking is, would Kenroku and Ame arrive back in time to back him up? Alright, a lot's going on here. I think we can all agree that the chances of Kathleen's mom returning alive are slim to none, and while I don't blame Ame, I blame everyone else. If I were in charge, many things would have gone differently, and I dare say dear old mom would still be alive. The first mistake was letting Ame do all the heavy lifting. Sure, she volunteered for it, but we've only seen her fight once or twice, and both times it was not like she really used excessive skill or fought at the level of Sensui or Kenroku. And even if she did all the times we've seen Kenroku, Sensui, and Yukinojo fight, mind you, these guys are some of the hardest mother-freaking warriors from another era, and yet they always fight together. And they fight together for a reason, because no man is an island. When fighting together, everyone has the other person's back and can easily cover for the other person's lapses. Just like when Naruto shows up just as Sasuke is about to kill the crap out of Sakura, or how Captain America shows up just when Thor is about to meet his Waterloo at the hands of Thanos. So yes, while the power of friendship might be overrated in Fast and Furious, it really is power, and evidently it is strong enough to keep people alive. If I were in their shoes, when Ame suggests she can take care of all the monsters by herself, I will laugh at her, apologize, and thank her for the kind gesture, but tell her that we trust her, but we don't want to let her have all the fun. I would then assign Yukinojo to protection duties. I would assign Kenroku to accompany Ame because his ninja eyes are trained to see well in the dark. Kathleen's mom is a victim of poor planning, and from the looks of things, Yukinojo might pay the same price very soon. Ame and Kenroku return by morning, but when they arrive, Yukinojo has literally eliminated every last one of the Gibiates that came to attack them during the night's watch. Our stud didn't let one get past him, but he came at a terrible cost, because as Ame and Kenroku call out his name, there's no response. Our boy fought to his last breath to protect Kathleen. Ame opens up the gate for Kathleen to come out, but then she makes an interesting comment. Despite so many stab wounds, Yukinojo is now turned into a Gibiate, and it supports our theory that these men from earlier centuries are literally built differently from we 21st century weaklings. But then they realize something even more scarring, which might be the reason why Yukinojo died. Lying in the corner is a Gibiate in the clothes of Kathleen's mom. She came back as a Gibiate, and because our boy Yukinojo had a soft spot for her, he couldn't bring himself to fight at his full capacity. Sensui finally wakes up from his rest to the death of his comrade. He does the final rites for our boy and closes Yukinojo's eyes, and for a moment everything is calm. But it's a peace that doesn't last. The Yakuza group drives through the street and their tire explodes near a car shop. They stop by for a bit of shopping, and that's when they run into some Gibiate. Although these guys look really horrible, they're really not that bad at killing Gibiate themselves. They manage to kill enough and run away for their dear lives. But after getting out, they do the thing nobody least expect. They return inside to kill all the flipping monsters. Great plan. So they get a lot of gas and light up the bastards with all the firepower they can muster, and after their little hunt, they all settle down to share a nice pot of ramen. Nothing like food after a good old GBA hunting, but the Yakuza boss doesn't join them because he's been thinking about what Aime said to him. He even goes so far as stopping Fatso here from stealing a dead man's wristwatch. I mean, it's not like he'd use it for anything anyway. The world's ending. Dr. Yoshinaga tells them they need to make a detour on their way to their new research facility in order to go get some more materials for the vaccine. Aime goes out of their way to make everyone some shields because she doesn't want anyone else to die. Kenroku remembers his friend from his own timeline, and Kenroku's friend is a weirdo who believed in superstition because if you see a red moon, it means you're gonna die. Truly, the day he saw a red moon, he died. The problem is, someone in our little group here is about to say red moon very soon. And right on cue, as soon as Kenroku comes out of memory lane, Sensui comments about how red the moon is tonight. Yep, our boy just marked himself for death. After their very long journey, Dr. Yoshinaga finally informs them that they have almost reached their destination, the research center. There's only just one problem. It's raining GBA in every nook and cranny. Yoshinaga encourages everyone to keep going, but Sensui points out that a lot of the GBA have hard shells that his swords won't work on. They eventually decide to keep going, but before they get down the bus, Kenroku assures Sensui that he's going to protect him by fighting like a true comrade. Kenroku decides he's going to be the new protector, but as soon as they get out of the car, they see the Yakuza group instead. Now they have to divide their attention between the Yakuza group and the GBA attacking, but to their surprise, the Yakuza ignore them completely and go after the GBA instead. Impressed by their change of heart, Kenroku and his team join the battle too and start subduing the GBA as fast as they can. The joint power of the group is so strong that Dr. Yoshinaga is impressed. But once again, the dear old doctor isn't fighting. Why? Aime's dad joins the fight this time and even protects Aime by fighting off a monster attacking her back, and after the battle, the Yakuza guys promise to help Dr. Yoshinaga and his group any way they can. They have no idea how badly this decision is going to cost them. And inside the lab, Dr. Yoshinaga continues his research, going over all the information he has garnered so far. While he works, the rest of the crew share a pot of curry and bond together. Kathleen decides to take some food to the doctor because he's working, and when she arrives, Yoshinaga informs her that thanks to the effort of Sensui and the rest of the team, he's gathered enough samples to create the vaccine from. Kathleen and Dr. Yoshinaga share a moment of friendship where Kathleen tells him how much she believes in his ability to make the vaccine. Ah, the aroma of true trust. Let's go somewhere else. Fatso, their resident bomber, also turns out to be a pretty smart engineer. He sets up the electrical stuff in the research facility and turns on so much light that the GBA would have a hard time coming close. Kathleen decides to interview everyone for posterity's sake, but really the rest of the group just spends their time talking to each other. Aime and her Yakuza dad spend a few minutes talking together, and although she can't forgive him yet, she thinks there may be hope for their relationship. When Kathleen asks Dr. Yoshinaga about his love life, he says he had one. But when Kathleen assumes that they broke up, he leaves us hanging by saying he never said so. Suspicious, right? Yakuza boss Kun spends his night dreaming about the past with his daughter Aime, but when he wakes up, all hell is broken loose because Meteora has casually strolled into their hiding place like the last boss that she is, and Sensui instructs the doctor to keep working on the vaccine while he goes out to charge at Meteora with all of his samurai honor. Even with Sensui and Kenroku in the mix, and with all of Fatso's bombing, Meteora just stands there like a badass, and surprisingly, instead of fighting, she ignores all of their attacks and heads in the direction of Yoshinaga's lab. Kenroku uses more firepower to force the creature back to the ground, and then Sensui rushes after it and starts slicing and dicing all over again. And as for Dr. Yoshinaga, he continues his work, totally not bothered by what's going on in the world around him, but when he comments on his reason for researching, something's wrong. Although he told everyone that he was researching into ways to turn creatures back into human, it turns out he was only looking for a way to turn back his lover to a creature that can communicate. Now, who on earth would that be? Yoshinaga finishes his vaccine, but as he rushes down the flight of stairs, he finds Meteora sprawled out on the floor. Dr. Yoshinaga asks Kenroku and the other guys why they killed Meteora, and they're like, she's our enemy. And that's when it's for the big reveal. Our nerd doctor reveals that he was never really from the country and he's not even human. Dr. Yoshinaga Yoshinaga came from space with his darling Meteora, but then she turned into a Gibiate, and he's been trying to turn her into a Gibiate with a consciousness, basically one that can speak and understand sentences. And he doesn't really care about humanity because he's like, there's no cure, so everyone died for nothing, but at least he'll be able to talk to his monster lover. Dr. Yoshinaga explains that his darling Meteora got infected with a disease and he had to run away with her, but they flew too close to the sun. So yeah, they brought the virus with them from outer space, and they are the cause of all of our problems. Oh, and it turns out Meteora has been tracking our doctor using brainwaves. Dr. Yoshinaga decides that since Meteora can't be saved anymore, there's no point to anything, including the death of her friends, and he quickly injects Ayame-san with a virus that turns her into a modified Gibiate. Dr. Yoshinaga pulls out a vial with an even more deadly combination than the one he fed Ayame and uses that on himself. Whoa! Pause the F out. What are these people thinking? Dr. Yoshinaga just confessed to being an alien, being responsible for the death of the entire human race, and by my book, that is punishable by death. These people have been striving to survive in an apocalyptic world, and the only hope we've been clinging to is that this psycho glass-wearing alien was going to pull up with a solution. And now there's no solution, so there's no reason why he should still be breathing. I do find it funny that we have a minimum of 2 solid killers out of time and an entire Yakuza group standing around playing nice with this alien piece of crap. Back in Sensui and Kenroku's era, he would have been dead way sooner for way less than this. Our boys have been the ones spearheading the killing, and I see no reason why they should just grow sentimental right now. I would have cut off Yoshinaga's head the minute he points out that he's an alien. At the very least, that would be one less bothersome Gibiate to worry about. And now he's just infected Ayame, and who knows what else is going to happen after this. Maybe they've gotten soft from traveling by his side for several days and have come to see him as a comrade in arms, but that still doesn't justify why he still had hands after infecting Ayame. I mean, take a look at this clip. Sensui is here, Kenroku is here, and even this guy is using this gun-using dude close by. One shot, one movement from any of these guys could have ended his career for good. And even if they don't want to kill him, just cut off his 2 arms for starters. And of course, if you look at the weather, it's already getting dark, so the longer they spend here before killing off this freak of nature, the harder their chances of leaving this situation alive. Of course, no one stopped the deranged doctor till he infects himself, and they're all having a hard time dealing with Ayame. She changes the fisherman dude into a Gibiate, but Gun-kun here deals with him before he can become a problem. But Ayame's Gibiate is not done. It kills off all of the Yakuza dudes and even goes after her father, but his loyalist protects him one last time, and Sensui finally thinks it's time for him to step up into the battle, so he uses the opportunity to slash Ayame's hand and lets her rest in peace at last. Kenroku attacks Dr. Yoshinaga's Gibiate, and I've got to say it's really an ugly looking thing, but it's really dangerous, and it turns out he's still morphing. Sensui, Kenroku, Ayame's father, and Kathleen are the last people standing, and they've promised to take Dr. Yoshinaga down with them. Kenroku decides to sacrifice himself to help Sensui get his chance at killing the doctor, because the sun is already getting low, but all his attacks are easily blocked because despite becoming a Gibiate, Yoshinaga is sentient. The Yakuza boss takes Kathleen to a safe space while Kenroku does the ninja dance with the monster. Doesn't help much though. Sensui comes in to assist, but even his treasured weapon breaks, and now Sensui can tell that his life is drawing to a close, but he keeps attacking, and the monster starts showing its superhuman strength, and just when things are looking super bleak, Kathleen shows up with her stun gun. Turns out the doctor told her that all the Gibiates are naturally weak against electricity, so she gives him the stunning of a lifetime, and it doesn't make much of a difference to the monster though, and he pulls the stun gun from her before fully morphing into a real badass flying monster just like Ayame. He stabs Kenroku in his belly, and that's goodbye to Ninja-san, and then he goes on to explain how Kenroku, Sensui, and Yukinojo were teleported to the present time, and it turns out it was all because of Kathleen's wish, which is crazy. The doctor tries to break them mentally by telling them they've all been pawns playing the Thanos game in his hand all this time, but the best thing about chess is that even a pawn can become a queen if they reach the end of the board. The Yakuza boss gives Sensui a sword and then tells Kathleen to live on in Ayame's place. He then charges into the monster, and the monster stabs him, but it doesn't realize that like Adam, Ayame's father strapped himself up with live rounds of explosives. The explosion goes off, and for the first time, the monster actually looks like it's taken a hit. And this is all the opening that Sensui and Kenroku need. Sensui slashes the head off of the monster in a split second, and Kenroku uses one more explosive to blow up the rest of the body. But they made too much noise while trying to finish off Dr. Yoshinaga, and now it's dark and all the monsters have heard the sound of their fighting. So Sensui does the honorable thing, and he shows them a wound he got from Dr. Yoshinaga, which means his time is up, so he tells Kenroku to look off Kathleen until he gets back, and then send them on their merry little way before diving like a true killer into the midst of 1,000 monsters. Does he survive? How far will Kenroku and Kathleen make? Are there other humans alive somewhere in this desolate world? So many questions, but our time is up. If you'd like to know the answers, stick around on our channel, and be sure to look out for How to Beat the Army of Monsters in the Gibiates Season 2.